We are a declining empire. And that, I believe, explains what Trumpism is. They're all going up in price. The inflation's coming back. And who does that hurt? Yeah, the middle and the bottom.
Richard Wolff declares, brace yourself now. Something crazy just happened with Trumpism, a shift that could redefine politics in ways no one saw coming.
I want to call this one Trumpism, what it all means. If you're like me, you've been amazed and thrown back a bit over the last several weeks since the inauguration by all of the noise and all the drama and all the television moments that have poured out of Washington, D.C. Tariffs, deportations, Trump is going to run for another term, laying off huge numbers of workers without any explanation beyond references to efficiency, which nobody takes seriously or ought to. And what probably rose in your mind, it certainly did in mine, was what does it all amount to? Is there something going on here that could make sense of what's happening? Is there some way to explain the big loud noises that keep coming? And I think there is, and I'd like very briefly to present it to you.
Richard Wolff asserts that the United States has essentially operated as a global empire for the last century, projecting power through its military, markets, and culture.
The United States has basically operated a global empire for the last century. During that time, it was pretty nice to be on the ride up, at least for those people who enjoyed the ride. Not everybody, not by a long, but for many, it was. Jobs got better, incomes got better, standard of living got better. The working class had to fight hard for those things. The employer class blocked it, delayed it, stopped it every chance they got. But they couldn't prevent the mass of people from fighting successfully for at least a rising standard of living. And I want to argue with you that when the peak happens in every empire, including ours, when you stop growing and prospering, then everything changes.
As the empire expanded, the US dollar became the global currency. But now it faces daily challenges, with rivals pushing to break its dominance.
As our empire grew, we put military bases, 700 of them around the world. Nobody else could do that, typical of an empire. Our currency, the US dollar, became the global currency, typical of an empire. Our ways of dressing, our ways of doing politics became models copied by many others around the world, typical of an empire. But now the dollar is being challenged more every day. The military prowess of the United States is less and less. The wars in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan now are not being won, they're being lost. We are a declining empire. And that, I believe, explains what Trumpism is. In every empire that has gone down, something happened which I believe is happening now, and which explains Trumpism. What happens in every declining empire is that the people at the top The richest, the most powerful, are in the best positions to hold on to their wealth. All that they accumulated during the rise of the empire, they are in the best position to hold on to. So that even though the empire is going down, they hold on to their extraordinary wealth. And here's what that means. If the rich and the powerful don't see a decline for themselves while the empire as a whole is going down, then the burden of the decline falls on the middle and lower classes who are not in a position to protect their wealth, modest though it may be, from the decline.
Richard asserts that Trump is famous for lowering taxes on corporations and the wealthy, policies that fueled profits at the top while widening the economic divide.
Now, how does that explain Trumpism? Here we go. Mr. Trump is famous for lowering the taxes on corporations and the rich. He did that in his first administration in 2017. At the end of 30 to 40 years, when wealth had been redistributed from the bottom and the middle to the people at the top, the crazy wealth of the Warren Buffetts, of the Elon Musks, that kind of thing. The richest people didn't need a tax cut. They had been doing better and better and better beyond everyone else. But Mr. Trump gave them a tax cut. It was the most important single piece of legislation he got through. That's really important. What else is Mr. Trump doing? He's firing large numbers of federal workers. There's no reason to do that. The efficiency argument is nonsense. There were more people being fired than any efficiency study had recommended. In any large corporation, if you want to become more efficient, you hire an efficiency company. They come in, they study, they take some time, they get the experts, and then they come up with suggestions. Anyone interested in efficiency knows that's how you do it. That's not how Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump are doing it. They're in a big rush. That's why Elon Musk stands there with a chainsaw.
Richard warns that the government wants to get rid of the working class, cutting off their pay so the tax cuts for the rich can stay in place.
That's what they want. They want to get rid of working class people, stop paying them so they can keep the tax cuts for the rich. And you know, when you fire tens of thousands of public employees, they have to go looking for jobs in the private sector where they will compete with the people trying to hold on to their jobs in the private sector. And that's going to lead to all kinds of difficulties. For whom? For the middle and the working classes and the poor. That's what's going on. That's what Trump amounts to. A whole program to shift the burdens of a declining empire onto the middle and the lower classes. Mr. Trump wants to take away collective bargaining rights for federal employees. That's the beginning of an on the labor movement, so that they can't fight for higher wages and will have to accept lower wages. And then we get to the tariffs, which are going to make everything that comes in from outside, the coffee in the morning that you drink, the sugar you put in the coffee, the avocado you smear on your toast, the automobile you buy and need, they're all going up in price. The inflation's coming back. And who does that hurt? Yeah, the middle and the bottom, whose real wealth is diminished because their wages and salaries don't keep up with inflation. You know how that feels. You've been living through it for the last several years. Trumpism is the way rich people at the top want to manage the decline of the empire, hold on to all they have, and let the rest carry the burden.
Your career ladder has just been yanked out from under you. So you're desperate. You're worried. You will offer yourself one way or another for less money than the person who's in that private sector job now.
We cannot accept these injustices, and neither should you.
Richard Wolff asserts that we are now at a level of debt and going into deeper trouble because of what Donald Trump did to our country.
We are now at a level of debt this country has never seen. It's becoming a scary problem because if the rest of the world no longer lends to the United States government to cover its deficits, what are we going to do? Let's remember that for many, many people, you get paid less if you work for the government than if you go in the private sector. And the compensation for that was job security.
Richard Wolff said that what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing is they've taken that security away from the labor.
What Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk are doing, more than what the workers are that they fire, is they've taken that security away. Where do you think public employees are going to go if either they've lost their job, which is happening to tens of thousands, or they're scared silly that they might lose their job? They're going to go into the private sector. Where else are they going to go? Which means they're going to drive down wages and working conditions in the private sector, because the worker who comes from the private sector, laid off after 5-10 years, that means not only your job is gone, your income is gone, but your career ladder has just been yanked out from under you. So you're desperate. You're worried. You will offer yourself one way or another for less money than the person who's in that private sector job now.
What Donald Trump did to us now used to be called trickle-down economics, where our hope at the top and get the tax cut from them.
It used to be called trickle-down economics. You help the folks at the top, you boost the profits, you give them a tax cut, and it'll trickle down to a good job for me and all that. I'm going to be more nice now than I ought to be. There was a grain of truth to that, but it isn't anymore. And that's perhaps the most important thing that I can tell you. And I'll say it as bluntly as I know how. The American empire is over. We're done. We peaked about 12, 15 years ago, and we are on a down. And it's very hard for the American people, which I understand. I am one. It's hard to get your head around that. We've had a century of on the way up, which is a lot more fun than on the way down. But it does happen to every empire. We're only the latest. Look at the British, how far they've fallen. We're in that process. So the problem with the trickle down is, there might be more jobs, but they're going to be created in China. They're going to be created in Brazil. They're going to be created in India. They're not created here.
Richard Wolff said that this tax cut is based on desperation, and the economy is on the greatest debt level.
This is a cut based on desperation. This is an economy that is indeed, we have the greatest level of corporate debt this country has ever seen, off the chart. The greatest level of personal debt, and we have the greatest level of government debt. Our government debt is now trillions of dollars greater than our annual output. That was not the case in the 20th century. It is the case now. What you're seeing is desperation politics. The whole Trump phenomena ought to say to you, wait a minute, these jerky moves that are out of whack, right? In recent days, we have seen the decision of the Trump administration to kiss the goodbye. We're not doing that no more because we can't afford it. We can't keep funding, which, by the way, the West is losing, as anybody who pays attention knows. All of these things are signs of what? Of a country that is in trouble and is turning on its friends because it can to save itself. We're going to take over, we're going to get your energy for nothing. We're going to, make you build the wall, you in Mexico. Look what The genius, in a way, of Mr. Trump is that without understanding it, because clearly he doesn't, he feels in his own way, the way lots of people do, that there's something that necessitates going way beyond what has been done because our need as a society is beginning to show up. Look, let me give you a simple example. The best electric vehicles in the world right now, but by uniform global agreement, are produced by something called the BYD Corporation, which probably most folks have never heard of, which is Chinese. BYD, the initials, BYD. They make the best quality, cheapest electric car and truck. All right. You don't see them anywhere in the United States. Why not? Because Mr. Trump put a 27% tariff on them, and Mr. Biden raised it to 100%. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to buy a $30,000 BYD electric vehicle, which you could do, that's what they charge. That's why it's so good. You would have to pay $30,000 to get the Chinese to ship it here. Then you'd have to give another $30,000, 100%, tariff to Uncle Sam, or in this case, Uncle Don, in the way of a tariff. So it would cost you $60,000, which you're not going to do because you can get a less good Tesla or GM or Ford or anybody else at $40,000 to $50,000, which is less than you'd have to pay.
Richard Wolff claims that what we are facing now is a new political party, which is roughly like our demonic party.
I call this one a new political party. And so let me start right in by announcing, if you have not already heard about it, that two of my favorite politicians have decided to form a new political party in the United Kingdom, in Britain. One of them is Jeremy Corbyn, who really is, for England, a pretty close equivalent to Bernie Sanders in the United States. A longtime activist in the Labour Party there, which is roughly like our Democratic Party in the United States. And he has been joined by Zara Sultana, who was a member of the Labour Party, elected to the parliament the way Corbyn had been. So these are two Labour Party activists and leaders breaking away from the Labour Party, which has been what they have done politically most of their lives, because they need, as they have made crystal clear, that we need, quote, a new kind of political party, one that belongs to you. And I want to read the basic statement. The system is rigged when 4.5 million children live in poverty in the 6th richest country in the world, Britain. The system is rigged when giant corporations make a fortune from rising bills. The system is rigged when the government says there is no money for the poor, but billions for the military and the. We cannot accept these injustices, and neither should you. I want to take a moment so that the historical significance of all of this settles in. There is a growing alienation of more and more Americans from the two-party duopoly. That's a monopoly when it's two instead of one, that has been running, or maybe better, ruining the country. Watching them joust over the hideous ugliness of the Epstein affair only deepens the awareness of the corruption of many dimensions that has settled in on both these parties. And I don't mean corruption, although that's part of it. I mean the corruption of dealing with these issues in place of the urgent needs of our time. Inside this economic system are the mechanisms, the relationships which prevent liberty, equality, fraternity, and democracy. Liberty, not in a meaningful sense. Fraternity, don't even imagine it.
Richard Wolff warns that something serious is about to hit America, pointing to capitalism itself as the engine of the coming crisis.
Well, modern capitalism, and let's hold for a moment what the definition is. Modern capitalism in the West comes out of the disintegration of a previous system called feudalism. And whatever we know, more or less, feudalism was a situation which had lords and serfs. The bottom of the society, the mass of people, were serfs on the land. They were serfs because their parents were serfs. They were on the land that their parents had farmed, and they were all part of a community run by someone above them called a lord. One of the reasons we have the word Lord in the Christian religion is it comes out of that period of time. The way to help people understand the Lord in the sky was to project from the Lord that ran the show in your little geographic area.
By the end of the 17th century, this system that had long structured Europe finally disintegrated, collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions.
Well, by the end of the 17th century, this system, which had existed in Europe, particularly for 1,000 years, disintegrated, fell apart. And the question was, what would come next? And there were groups of people who were very passionate about what ought to come next. These are the people who became famous in the French Revolution, which was a kind of culmination of the end of feudalism and the beginning of something different. And that something different was a situation where nobody would be stuck in the land on which they were born, stuck in doing what their parents did. It was a change that was celebrated by the people then as freedom. As important as the word freedom was to get rid of the old systems where people could be property of other people.
Richard asserts that the American Revolution started earlier than people think and shared the same themes of resistance, power, and self-determination.
So the end of feudalism, like the end of, was celebrated as a step for human freedom. Indeed, the champions, both in Western Europe and in the United States, because remember, the French Revolution is 1789. The American Revolution was actually a few years earlier and had many of the same themes in it. Well, the great slogan of the French Revolution was liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are very powerful words, and they were great motivators. Feudalism couldn't survive because it was the opposite of liberty. You weren't free to move. Equality, people would have laughed at that. The Lord lived in the mansion. If you've ever gone to Europe as a tourist, you visit the great chateaus, the great Schlosses in German, the great homes and mansions where the rich lords lived. The mass of people were in no way equal. They didn't have equal income. They didn't have equal standard of living. They didn't have equal political rights. They didn't have equal education. None of it. And so the whole idea was that a new system would be brought in to give people liberty, equality, fraternity, and what the Americans added, democracy. The people should rule, not the lords.
Richard asserts that in a true democracy, it's the people who should rule, not the lords, and that rule must be shared equally by all.
The people should rule, and they should rule equally. Not gradation, not some people more equal than others. What a fantastic idea. And it was the idea that Thomas Jefferson thought was magnificent, and so he kept it. And so did Sam Adams, and so did many of the others who made the American Revolution. And so did Robespierre and Danton and Marat, the great leaders of the French Revolution. Well, why am I telling you this? Because they did usher in a new system. No more lords, no more serfs, no more masters, no more. The new system organized people to produce goods and services, which they always had. But this time, the relationship between them was that of the employer and the employee. Some people would be selling their ability to work, and other people would be buying it. And that was a very different relationship from the serf and the master, or the serf and the lord. And they brought that system in, the new system. You would be free to go wherever you wanted. You could work for any employer who would hire you. And you would be part of this new economic system. They didn't call it capitalism. They didn't know what to call it. So some of them called it freedom. Some of it thought it's the people will finally be in charge. Democracy. Okay, it came at the end of the 18th century. By the middle of the 19th century, 50 years, 75 years later, it was the new system established in Europe. And at that time, Karl Marx reached his adulthood. And so he was living in this new system. He loved the slogans of the French and American revolutions. They were his passion too. Liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy. He was part of the generation that welcomed all of that. They were the generation that included Beethoven and the music he wrote to celebrate all that. The new novelists who talked about what it meant in daily life for people to go through the transition. But here comes Marx's absolutely crucial contribution. He looked around him. He was born in Western Germany, right near the French and German border. So it was already well along the way of capitalism, had overthrown feudalism.
Richard claims that we still haven't achieved liberty, equality, fraternity, or true democracy, because while these ideals are praised in speeches and written into constitutions,
he looked around and he said to himself and to those close to him, we got capitalism, it's a new system. This employer-employee system, it's not feudalism, it's not. But did we achieve liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy? And his answer was a very honest no. No, we haven't. And by the way, he goes to London around the time of Charles Dickens. For those of you who've ever read a Dickens novel, Mr. Dickens was showing us how the following is true. Equality, we don't have. Liberty, not in a meaningful sense. Fraternity, don't even imagine it. We got capitalism, this new system, and Marx was one of the early ones to use that kind of language. We got it, but what was promised to come along with it, we didn't get. And so the question becomes, for Marx, why not? Why didn't we get it? Is it some special circumstance? Is it a bad leader? Is it any one of the details of life in Western Europe in the middle of the 19th century when Marx is doing his work? And Marx reached an answer to that question. And the answer was no, it's not about this or that detail. Inside this economic system are the mechanisms, the relationships which prevent liberty, equality, fraternity, and democracy.